Time magazine called him the unsung hero behind the internet. CNN called him a father of the internet. President Bill Clinton called him one of the great minds of the information age. He has been voted history's greatest scientist of African descent. He is Philip Emeagwali. He's coming to Trinidad and Tobago to launch the 2008 Kwame Ture lecture series on Sunday, June 8th at the JFK Auditorium, New St. Augustine, 5 p.m. The Emancipation Support Committee invites you to come and hear this inspirational mind address the theme, Crossing New Frontiers to Conquer Today's Challenges. This lecture is one you cannot afford to miss. Admission is free, so be there on Sunday, June 8th, 5 p.m. at the JFK Auditorium, New St. Augustine.
Loosely speaking, parallel supercomputing is akin to multitasking with millions upon millions of processors. Humans want to be gods that perform organ transplants and IVF or in vitro fertilization and euthanasia or dignified death. I believe that the planetary-sized supercomputer that I first conceived in 1974 and that I described in my lectures of the early 1980s will take us closer to creating the golden calf, the god that our post-human descendants of year million will worship. Perhaps the god post-humans could try to revive as their all-powerful ruler. The deity that will control the minds of post-humans. The deity that could become the planetary superbrain of our year million post-human descendants. My two test bed problems were grand challenge initial boundary value problems that arose from extreme scale computational fluid dynamics. In the general circulation modeling of the motions of fluids that enshroud the Earth, three-dimensional circularity exists by definition. But in the simulation of the motions of the fluids inside a production oil field that is the size of a town, the crude oil, injected water, and natural gas that flows 1 mile deep and flows into and from each petroleum reservoir comes from the petroleum reservoirs that bounded it, except for the first and last petroleum reservoirs. Again, I visualized the entire oil field that I was simulating, and that is the size of a town as divided into 65,536 equal-sized oil fields. Please allow me to introduce myself. On August 26, 2000, then US President Bill Clinton talked about the contribution of Philip Emeagwali to the development of the computer. In the days following President Bill Clinton's televised speech, I was inundated with inquiries about my contribution to supercomputing. A few days later, the Guardian newspaper of Nigeria wrote an 8-page spread on my contributions to the development of the computer. Despite that 8-page newspaper profile, I needed 80,000 pages to fully tell my story. Where do I begin my story? Do I begin with the laws of physics? Or do I begin with the technique of calculus? Or do I begin with algebra that was the bridge between physics and calculus? At a scientific conference, I introduced myself as a large-scale computational algebraist that figured out how to put algebra on the world's fastest supercomputer and in service to physics and calculus as well as to society. My discovery of the parallel supercomputer that occurred on the 4th of July 1989 that made the news headlines broke new grounds because I was the first person to figure out how to harness a new internet that was a new global network of a million or even a billion commodity off-the-shelf processors that were tightly coupled and that were identical to each other. I figured out how to harness a billion processors and use them to solve the grand challenge problems that were once impossible to solve. That parallel supercomputer that was then science fiction became a reality and a new computing machinery that was not a computer per se, but that was a new internet de facto. The important lesson is this: we cannot invent a new computer without also inventing a new computer science. Nor can we invent a new calculus without also extending the frontiers of knowledge and doing so at the interdisciplinary crossroad where mathematics and physics met. The genius is the ordinary person that found the extraordinary in the ordinary, and in her grand challenge, is to solve the toughest problem and do so as if it wasn't tough. Back in 1989, I was in the news headlines because I discovered that the massively parallel supercomputer is a tool that makes it possible for us to ask a grand challenge question and get the answer in only one day, instead of in 1,000 centuries. In computational physics, a problem that takes 180 years of time to solution is a grand challenge problem. That computation-intensive problem is solvable in 180 years, but is unsolvable in only one day.
Insightful and brilliant lecture.